This is my video about how Vivi is going to be banned in Standard. Okay, starting off here, Vivi is obviously broken. If you haven't seen Vivi, here he is. He's a 3-mana red and blue legendary creature wizard, and he has some of the most broken abilities ever printed onto a card into Standard. Now, predicting the future is pretty tough, especially when it comes to wizards and bannings in terms of what will actually get banned, but this video I'm going to explain why I know that Vivi will definitely get banned in Standard, especially seeing the previous bannings that happened in Standard just a few months earlier. And it's not just because I saw the Arena Championship and saw the 54% of the field being playing Izzet Cauldron, including most of the decks in the top 8 being Izzet Cauldron. I actually summed up this video before this championship happened and showed that Vivi is the very obvious best card in Standard. But first, we need to go over that deck, so let's take a look at what Vivi Cauldron actually does. The basic combo is to use Agatha's Soul Cauldron to exile a Vivi from your graveyard. Now, Vivi has the activated ability to add blue or red mana equal to Vivi's power only once a turn and only during your turn. Vivi also has the passive text of whenever you cast a non-creature spell, you get a counter onto Vivi and it does 1 damage to your opponent. This means that Vivi is kind of reliant on you playing non-creature spells to power him up, so that way you can do both a lot of damage to your opponent and also gain a lot of mana. Now, using Agatha's Soul Cauldron on a Vivi in your graveyard only copies over the mana ability to your creatures that have +1/+1 counters thanks to the Agatha's Soul Cauldron abilities. However, because most of your creatures are going to have more power than Vivi's 0 power to start off with, it immediately gives you a huge surge of mana when you put a +1/+1 counter on any creature with the Vivi Cauldron combo. This makes it so that way the best deck in Standard right now basically just runs all of the creatures that draw and discard cards that both get Vivi into your graveyard and also gain a power creature in play to put the counter onto to start making tons of mana. For example, here, Fear of Missing Out is a 2/3 for 2 that discards a card and then draws a card, and that's all the text that matters on the card. All you need to do is play this card down, discard your Vivi, next turn you can play the Cauldron, eat your Vivi, and you're immediately off to the races, making 3 extra mana every single turn in your red-blue deck. Because this deck strongly plays like a combo deck, card draw is also super duper powerful in the deck. The best card in the deck is probably actually Winter Night Stories, which is you draw 3 cards and then discard 2 cards unless you discard a creature card, which you already wanted to do because the only card you really ever want to discard in this deck is the Vivi. To be honest, the way that they printed Vivi Ornitier feels like they really forgot about the combo with Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which has been a card that's been present in Standard for a long time and really hasn't done that much broken stuff. People have tried to break it here and there, but now that we have a creature that gives you basically infinite mana, if you can exile it underneath Agatha's Soul Cauldron, it immediately has started breaking the Standard format. This begs the question, though. Do you ban the Vivi or the Cauldron? Are you banning the broken payoff in Vivi that completely demolishes your opponent once you get it underneath the Cauldron, or do you ban the broken enabler, the Agatha's Soul Cauldron, which actually enables the entire combo from eating the Vivi from the graveyard? My thoughts are they might actually end up banning both. Agatha's Soul Cauldron has had 3 years in Standard where it hasn't really done that much, so banning it out at this point probably doesn't have that big of an influence on Standard, as it's going to rotate out relatively soon anyway in comparison to Vivi. I'm sure that over the previous years, Agatha's Soul Cauldron has forced a lot of designs in Standard to be warped around the fact that they can easily have activated abilities go into any creature for only 2 mana, meaning that the fact that Vivi actually works with this seems like a weird anomaly more than something that was intended by the designers. And whilst I think that Agatha's Soul Cauldron will probably catch a ban sooner rather than later, this doesn't mean in my mind that Vivi won't get banned, because Vivi is still completely broken even if you don't have Agatha's Soul Cauldron legal in Standard. Obviously, Vivi is really powerful in the Soul Cauldron deck, but there's another deck that's still playable in Standard right now, which is just running Vivi normally in a Prowess shell. The Prowess version of Vivi currently runs cards like Sleight of Hand and Stock Up to not only draw into your Vivi and get your powerful enabler onto the board, but it also is a non-creature spell to help power up your Vivi, do damage to your opponent, and generate you more mana. Before the bannings, this deck was massively overshadowed by the Corey Steelcutter card, which is both a non-creature spell to trigger all your prowess stuff, but also gives you white monk tokens with prowess, meaning that you can both flood the board, present a prowess trigger with your Corey Steelcutter, and also have a card that's really hard to remove, being an artifact equipment as opposed to a creature. Ever since they banned Corey Steelcutter, they've been forced to play just the okay version of Corey Steelcutter, also printed in Final Fantasy, Astrolobian's Planisphere. Astrologian's Planisphere is definitely a big step down from both Corey Steelcutter and Vivi Ornitier, because Vivi generates you a ton of mana and Corey Steelcutter generates you a huge board. Planisphere really only generates you a really large creature, which most decks will have a generic way of removing without having to do any significant work in the deck builder. Whilst this deck is certainly weaker right now after the ban of Corey Steelcutter and a lot of other cards that would be playable in Prowess, it needs very little setup to become a really playable deck at Standard once again. I say it would only need really one more powerful payoff to become a really, really strong deck in Standard with Vivi in it. The card doesn't have to be at a power level similar to Corey Steelcutter. As long as it's something that is almost as powerful as Vivi or a little bit less so, I think Vivi will absolutely pop off once again in a prowess shell. But even this is just scratching the surface on the problem with Vivi Ornitier. And that is because Vivi breaks absolutely anything if they print something a little bit too strong into the game. Right now, the thing that Vivi is doing in standard is making an insane amount of mana, which is making all the card draw spells really good, but this isn't the only thing that will easily break Vivi. Vivi cares about power, meaning if you print a card that grants too much power too easily, Vivi will become overpowered. Vivi cares about the fact that you cast non-creature spells, meaning if you print a really good prowess card or a really good prowess deck, Vivi will become overpowered once again. Vivi cares about +1/+1 counters, which means if you have cards that also care about +1/+1 counters or need +1/+1 counters to go on, Vivi is an easy enabler. Vivi does damage to the opponent, meaning that if you have a card that cares about dealing damage to your opponent, Vivi is another easy enabler. There's so many things that Vivi activates just by existing in the format that Vivi is super duper easy to break. A card like Vivi puts a huge risk on future card printings because the Wizards designers have to design around the fact that Vivi is enabled by so many different things, and if they push something just a little bit too far, the card can take over standard and be the only card that is really focused on in the standard format. The even crazier part to me, though, is that there's a really easy fix that they could have implemented on Vivi that would have not only still had it be a powerful commander card, a card that would see play in standard, but wouldn't completely break the game wide open when combined with cards like Agatha's Soul Cauldron. If they simply made Vivi's mana ability check the number of +1/+1 counters on the creature rather than its total power level, it not only means that it wouldn't only care about cards that buff power or cards that would copy the ability onto creatures with power, but it would also make it so that way Vivi wouldn't just easily go infinite with cards that grant a huge amount of power before it activates its ability. But by making the card way more powerful than it needs to be, basically putting no balance checks in place in front of Vivi's mana ability and its ability to get bigger over time, it has a huge cost on not only the format, but on the game as a whole. If you haven't heard it before, Fire Design is the design that Wizards has implemented since around 2019, I want to say, where they're going to be printing more powerful cards and taking larger risks in terms of pushing the power level of cards in standard formats. The first example of this that I remember really having such a massive metagame impact is Oko Thief of Crowns. I played during the standard format with Oko in many tournaments, and everyone knew it was so obvious that the card was going to get banned. However, if you're going to a tournament and you know that a card is going to get banned, what do? Do you play a different deck that's most obviously way worse, making it more likely that you lose the tournament, or do you shell out a ton of cash to buy a playset of a card that you know is immediately going to drop in price after the bannings happen? When a card is so pushed that you know is going to get banned, it causes huge lose-lose scenarios for not only the people who want to play with the card on a fun level, but also the people who want to play with the card on a competitive level. It's really just bad for everyone, except for Wizards trying to sell as many cards as possible for as high a price as possible. This creates a really potent cocktail when combined with the fact that Wizards is pushing cards for Commander more and more over the years. On the lists of insanely powerful cards, more and more are going to end up being like Nadu, which was a card that was made a little bit stronger so that way you would see more play as a commander, and then it completely breaks Eternal formats because they just didn't think of the way it would work with cards with 0 mana activated abilities. This combined with the fact that there's 6 standard sets coming into standard every single year now, and multiple of them are Universes Beyond requiring more focus, just means that the game has way less time to actually balance the cards that are going to see print. Whilst there may be cards like Stock Up, which fly under the radar until they are picked up by pro players and played in Eternal level events, I feel like a card like Corey Steelcutter, which ended up at the top of basically every list for the best card in Tarkir Dragonstorm, is really obvious as a card that needs to be balanced a little bit more to not just completely break the game up on print. And this is even more true because we're getting more sets in Standard now. Standard is the metagame that you want to be the friendliest towards new player and have the least broken number of cards. Otherwise, everyone is simply only going to play limited because all the other formats are completely broken by new cards which are seeing print every single new set. But because of the fact that Wizards keeps printing a new broken card each set, it makes it really hard to balance for the previous sets because you need to print a new card to keep up with it unless you're just willing to ban the best card coming out from every set. Edge of Eternities has this card, Cosmo Grand Zenith, which looks really, really similar to Corey Steelcutter, but it's in white and on a creature. Obviously the best card printed in the set and the card that everyone is chasing right now for Standard. When your standard metagame has every single set come out with a new broken card that feels ban-worthy and super powerful, but yet is overshadowed by another card from a previous set, for example, we can see Corey Steelcutter overshadowing Vivi a large amount, it'll make it really, really hard to ever make any meaningful adjustment with bans, because even if you ban the best card from the previous set, the new best card from the new set will simply take over, and because all of these cards are at such a high power level compared to the normal cards printed into standard, there is simply nothing you can do except hope there's a massive swath of bannings for every single set that comes out in the game. To close out this video, I want to look at two cards that have the same idea, both coming from the Final Fantasy set. One of them is a good design card, and one of them is a bad design card. Looking at a card like Sephiroth Fabled Soldier here, I feel like it's a really good example of a card that is extremely pushed, but isn't overall toxic to the game as a whole. He's a threat, but he doesn't immediately end the game when not dealt with. Sacrificing a creature gives you some cards back when he comes into play, and he's very, very easy to set up with other small creatures with dies effects. In general, when your opponent plays a Sephiroth down, especially in a sacrifice deck, you're going to feel the pressure. I need to kill Sephiroth. He's really powerful. But if you don't kill Sephiroth on the first turn immediately, it's not just guaranteed that you're immediately going to lose the game, the same way it is when your opponent plays down a Vivi on turn 3. Whilst Sephiroth has a 3/3 body, meaning it rumbles in combat pretty okay for 3 mana, and also has a card ability that lets you draw more cards if you have set up with it already, it means that Sephiroth both functions as part of a deck as a whole, but also generally does the thing on its own okay. Vivi is a card that literally does nothing on its own. It's a 0/3, so if you don't have any other synergy with it, like a non-creature spell to pump its power, it literally does nothing. You have to have the setup to do the thing with Vivi. As a reward for needing the setup for the card to do literally anything, Vivi gets the option to immediately kill your opponent on turn 4 as early as possible in Standard. No shade to the designers of Magic though. It's a really, really tough balance that they have to strike, making cards that are balanced for all of the formats and are also playable in a format as powerful as Commander. However, after all these years, I do feel like seeing cards like Sephiroth show that Wizards has the ability to design cards that are both powerful in Commander, fun to play with in a Standard format, and don't immediately ruin the metagame when they see play. However, a card like Vivi, I can't really imagine any scenario where I'm across the board from this card, and I feel like I'm in a fair scenario that is good. All this to say, I hope Vivi gets banned soon. This is some of the most obscene stuff that I've ever seen in a Standard metagame, and it definitely deserves the ban hammer, at least to some extent. We'll see whether or not they decide to ban the Cauldron first and make the deck a little more neutered until some other broken threat comes out that enables Vivi once again, or if they just cut the head of the Hydra off right now and say, okay, no more Vivi, we're not going to go through this broken rigmarole again. I want to hear your opinion down in the comments, though. Do you think Vivi is as overpowered as I'm making him out to be, or do you think is more of an Agatha Soul Cauldron problem or a Standard metagame problem right now? Like and subscribe if you want to see me talking about more cards like this. Thanks for watching the video, and I hope to see you in the next one.